The Lindbergh Schools Board of Education Workshop 1595 is called to order. 1.0, any additions or corrections to the agenda? Dr. Lake, do we have any changes to the agenda?
We do not.
Okay, 2.0 is approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
By Jen, and a second by
Second.
Megan. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. 4.0, discussion topics. 4.01 is our compass goals, and I believe, Joelle, you'll be leading us there.
Before you jump in, so just for everybody knows, this is the first Compass iteration with our new strategic plan. I want to make sure the community knows that. And so we also want to highlight a new template. This is our new template. We had the same template for 5 years. So Beth, thank you for creating that. So anytime we present at conferences or we do anything, we like to keep that brand. So this will be kind of our brand for the next 5 years. And it highlights a lot of the Lindbergh life success skills in there as well. So again, and we'll run through these. And again, this isn't all of their goals. Again, this is just some highlights of what they want to make sure you and the community are aware of. All right, go Joelle.
Okay. This is, of course, the finance and operations compass goals for the year. And as Dr. Lake said, this is just a sampling of the higher level ones. We have a list. A lot of our items are tactical because that's what we do is the operations piece. So I really focused on really the finance piece or the way to optimize resources, especially in a non-reassessment year when our revenue is lower. So those are what I focused on. But take a look at all of our items because I think they're all great. And I have a good team that puts them together with me. The directors that work in the operations and the finance staff are great when this comes to this. Next slide. So we just talked about what the colors mean, and the green means that it's carried forward into the next school year. So we had a goal last year, and we are carrying it forward into the next year. The orange means that it was moved up from last year, so maybe something was an investigate and went to research. So the top item is district energy management at the high school. The high school, really, we haven't got to nudge in that as much as we wanted to this year because we were still working on the project. We had that as a compass goal last year, but we really didn't get that far because it's just completing. So we are working with the energy management team at Navitas, who has worked with us on all the buildings to do this, and they're working on the high school, which is a brand new HVAC system. Now we need to have the same protocols and staff need to understand. So we're really excited about that. It is a work in progress. It has started. Hopefully will be implemented fully at the end of next school year. Energy is the second one as well. We do have part of our energy management district-wide, which this is all money. It is, how we get more dollars. When there's not new revenue, we look at reducing expenditures. That's how we get the dollars in our budget. So some of our schools are already Energy certified, Energy Star certified, and they'll get a nice little plaque to put on the front of their front lobby that says they meet those requirements, and we want to get the rest of the districts, rest of the schools certified as well. The next one is one that's everybody's happy about. It's the Farmers Club STEM Center, and it does a lot more than STEM. It has a lot of other neat things that are happening besides STEM in it as well. We really wanted to get past April 2nd, and know where we were at. So now there's a lot of funding opportunities galore, I would say, not just even with the Federal Inflation Reduction Act, but there's other funding opportunities. This is money that was out there in COVID that is still available for programs like this. So now we can dive in and start working with companies that can help us fund certain projects at that building. The last one is looking at our ECE West building, which is shared programming right now with early childhood and community ed, and both of those programs are growing, and that space just needs to be examined on how we can let both of those programs blossom while not in the same space or in a different space or whatever. So we want to really dive into that this year as well. Next. Continuously improve operational efficiencies. Transportation, I know at our last board meeting, Jen, you asked us, can we afford this? Yes, on transportation, even prior to the new contract, every year there was an increase in costs. It was 3.5 in the last contract, and now it's 4 each year. So We do want to look at ways to get that lower than 4, and we already have some ideas on the table, but we'll continue with that. Another item that we didn't get fully implemented last year was, we knew we had to add staff at the high school, especially in the sports staffing and equipment as well, because we have a bigger space area and we haven't got all of that done. Some of it because of labor shortages and some of it because the building just was not complete for us to finalize that. So we want to continue with that implementation. Research trends and payment management, this is a boring one, yeah, but it is about how things have changed since COVID in regard to cash and banking and just a ton of things that are boring to everybody else. But even our banking bid looked different in the results from that, and we want to look at what we need to do to come in current practice with the new trends. The research on the bottom is purchasing cost increases. We've got past COVID and we've seen that prices have not gone down, that they're really staying where they're at. In our budget, we do a great job with the hybrid-based programming. Buildings and departments build their budget. They look at what they have and they have to rebuild their budget every year, but they start with the same dollars. And if they want something new, they have to reduce that. Where other schools may just say, we're gonna add 3% here, 5% here, and then they give that globally, or we're gonna cut that here and cut that. We kind of work on it more detailed. This might be an area in the next year, as we gather data, that we might have to say, supplies are gonna have to get a 3% increase, because it's just not going back down. And we need a new leveling point, but we haven't done that yet. We have to make our departments be cost efficient and look at other areas to cut to meet the needs. Next slide. Customer service and transparency. We do have some things with this budget, you'll hear about later, that's a little bit different because of where we're at. And one of the items that we've, Tara and I and some other directors worked on in 2021, but really didn't get to formally roll it out, was a decision-making framework and some tools that all of our staff can use when they come with an ask. It's like, that's a homework project for them to bring to us. And, you know, in a year when there's not a lot of funds and we're not gonna say no, we're still a culture of yes, but we might say not now. So these type of things, having this document used and the template, everybody will bring it in the same format. And then if it's not now, we can file that away and not lose those ideas and then prioritize them in future budgets. So I'm excited about that. It's a little bit more paperwork, but it will really be something I think will be helpful in the future. The next one is implement, as far as just coming off of a big bond project and large projects, we've learned, and we want to do some different things with change orders, and we're going to do some different processes, a little bit more time with the architect team and the contractor in front of our advisory committees, our finance advisory committee and our facilities advisory committee, and they can bring a board member, of course, representing, and then they can bring that information forward. We do take a lot of time with change orders. I think there's a good example in this board packet of something that we pushed through because we wanted to get it done. It wasn't very pretty, but it's like, okay, we got to move off square one. We've been working on this one for a long time now. Let's move forward. So I'm excited about that process as well. Research, we did look at this as well with our new custodial leadership team. They really want to work on a process that's proven with other schools and have a checklist with our buildings on what gets cleaned first. And I think it's helpful for teachers and administrators too to see, like, these are our priorities. So if we don't have staff today, then this is going to fall off. So instead of like everybody getting upset, you have to understand if we don't have anybody in today, this is what we're going to focus on. And we've walked down that path as well, but we haven't, because we went past the investigate stage, but we need to dive in a little bit more now, since we are actually probably at like 80% staffed, almost 85% staffed with our custodians right now, which, I should knock on wood, that's been the highest we've been in a long time. The last one is, this is also the same thing as the supply. We're finding out that equipment we need to replace, and some of the things that people don't think about is we do own our food service equipment. We contract out with somebody, but all of the equipment is ours, and we have to replace a lot of those things, and everything is costly, so we need to look at that. Next slide. I'm done.
I like that we're implementing kind of like these processes, right? Especially with the change orders, like we took what we learned from our big prop and we're changing how we go about it. I think it'll be more transparent for our stakeholders, and like we're doing it for other things too. So I just want to say thank you for digging into those things and coming up with defined processes for them.
On the custodial standards, is this Association of Physical Plant Administrators, is that something that's where the research is on that particular program, or is that something that we're already using? And-
We want to use it.
Okay.
We actually, with our new director and some, changes in nutrition, we've met with the supervisor of custodians now, and he's very interested in it. So we actually joined a PPA, and we've been sending him to conferences. It is, we don't need to recreate the wheel. It's something that a lot of schools use and even universities use. And what I like about it is it really is showing the buildings and the people at the front line, like, we do care about cleaning the rooms and just understanding that it is a very hard thing to do, like, without staff. And so I think it's just letting kind of everybody know the same, what environment we're in, and then building that relationship with the team and their custodians and then the supervisors. So it's a really neat process. I'll have to highlight it at some point.
All right, well then it is my pleasure to introduce some members of our teaching and learning team to join me. We have Dr. Jill Lawson, Executive Director of Assessment and Student Services, Dr. Craig Hamby, Executive Director of Elementary Education. I need to move over there? Oh boy, okay. I gotta bring a chair then. It's gonna be a bring your own chair kind of meeting. Then we have, who did I say? I said Jill, I said Craig, did I say Ronnie? Okay, Ronnie, we have Ronnie, Dr. Ronnie Zagora, the Executive Director of Secondary Education. We have Maureen Stabler, our Intervention Coordinator, and we have Colin Davitt, our Blended Learning Coordinator. And now we have 3 microphones to share among the 3 of us. Okay, let me get myself settled here for a second. Okay, so as you see on the slide deck there, we are really focusing on academic growth, innovative programming, real-world learning experiences, and success skills for our student. As we go to the next slide, I really want to highlight, we have 2 primary goals within teaching and learning. One is having a safe, supportive, and collaborative environment. This is really our social emotional learning goal. And then our other is our instructional practices, the academic achievement and growth of our students. So this is where we really, I know that when we talked about the strategic plan before, we have these broad ideas that are within the strategic plan. This is where we get down into those nitty gritty. How do we measure the outcomes of what we are doing for students? I'm not going to talk about each of these goals. Most of them are carrying over from last year because we are continuing this work. But I do want to highlight the things that are in bold, because those are elements of these goals that have changed from previous years. So for example, that second bullet where we talk about 85% of our elementary students are low risk for social emotional concerns, we are measuring that based on MySabers. There's 2 components of social emotional screening. There are the teacher rating scales, and then there are the student self-rating scales. MySabers is the student self-rating scale. So we got a little bit more specific about looking at the student identified criteria. The other change we made, and actually this is a decrease a little bit in our expectation, we set a goal very high of expecting that 90% of staff would participate in our climate and culture survey. And HR puts out that survey, and then we use that data to influence what's happening in buildings. We were not anywhere near that goal, so we wanted to get a little more realistic. So we did drop that down to 75%, that it would be a more attainable goal and still give us a reasonable understanding of what's happening in our buildings in the district overall. As part of that survey, we look at collective teacher efficacy. This is really that idea that everybody believes that they are responsible for every kid in the building. And one of the things that we have done over the last couple of years is we've said on that survey, we want at least a 3.0 out of 4 average or above. What we have found is that there are elements of that survey where we are hitting 3.5 or above out of 4.0 scale. But one of the areas where that did not happen was in our connections between general ed and special education. It was only at a 3.1. So we obviously want to see that number grow. So we are expanding our expectation to a 3.3 across all of those areas. So again, a way to raise the bar, how we continuously improve. We've also been doing a lot with restorative practices throughout the district, and wanted to codify that into our expectations for buildings, that they are looking through a restorative practices framework within their school plans. So that means they're building classroom communities, they're using restorative practices and formats to resolve conflict within the building, et cetera. Things that really tie into the work that we're already doing. And then as we continue to support our students, we want to see that they are continuing to grow in their percentage of feeling supported by staff. And we want to drill down to all of the student groups on that. So individual students, student groups based on various populations, and then students as a whole. We just want to see continual growth there. And then a new one we've added, as you know, our secondary schools have just recently been designated as schools as character. Our goal is within the next 5 years to have that be the case for all of our schools. And as we go to the next slide, we'll start to look at some of the specific action plans under this goal.
Okay, so as Tara stated, a lot of those particular measures align with our social emotional universal screening tools that we use in our district. We're in our second year of doing that. We have, at our elementary level, we use the MySabers, and we also have the teacher component. And then 6 through 12, we use Panorama. And referring back to some of those goals on the slide before, looking at that 90% participation, we are at 81% right now, and we're working through ways to increase that participation from our students. This is not students who have opted out. This is just full-on participation. And we have some middle schools who are well above the 90%, and then we have some buildings where it's really a scheduling thing, and so we're working on ways. Buildings are already problem-solving through that to get to that 90% for the next year. So 81% right now, 90% next year will be where we are. Looking at the slide before mentioned about 85% low risk and savers, we are currently meeting that goal, but as a teaching and learning team, we always talk about the importance of keeping the things that we value on our compass work so that we continue to have that always in our face monitoring. How are we doing with that, with our students on the MySabers social emotional screener. So right now, hitting that goal at 86.2%, and teachers actually had it at 88% their scales that they marked for students. So doing well, always want to grow in that. Would love to see that go above 90% as well, but that is where we are right now. Thinking about Panorama, which is the tool we use for grades 6 through 12, we are looking at that. We are in the 40th percentile or above, looking at in comparison to our peers of all those nationwide who participate in Panorama, and we are at the 40th percentile above on all the categories that we selected within the Panorama tool. But with that tool, there's a lot of great desegregation that happens when you're looking at those reports. And being in our second year, we can really get comfortable with how buildings and how we are using that data to just dig into individual student groups to see how we can continue to grow. So one of our focus, and this really has to do with Dr. Mason's work that she is doing in her building, and I'm highlighting her because she's not here right now, but definitely a huge part of all of this. We're looking at that supportive relationship piece. And if you look at our supportive relationships district-wide, we're at 87%, which is fantastic. I mean, we would love to be 100%. That is the target. But we're at 87%. But as you start to dig into particular questions, we're at 81% when it comes to supportive relationships for school teachers and other school adults. And so we would like to see that part grow. And so how do we do that? And not only that, if you on the slide before, we talked about a 5% increase with each student group within that supportive relationship question that we're asking. So through the work that Maureen Stabler is doing, the work that Dr. Mason is doing, the work that we are all doing, really looking at the details and the action steps within our Compass plan so that we can target particular student groups to see those increase. Because all of that is important, but those relationships with our school teachers and school adults it's just crucial. So that is a little bit about the Panorama and the social emotional work that we were doing, and I'll come back in on the next one.
All right, so one of the, again, as a reminder, if if it's color-coded in green, we're continuing the work. If it's black, it's new. So one of our new research items is our environments matter for students. So one of the things that we've done over the last few years is we've really done a lot with furniture selection, flexible environments in order to match the learning environment to the types of learning that students are doing. We have done that with the expectation that buildings would be able to fund some of the furniture purchases for the future, and we've realized that's just not a very equitable way to go about this, and it's not going to really result in significant change. So we are researching how it might be possible to do something better. When the high school construction was happening, all of the furniture at the high school was graded. And then we determined what is the first level of furniture that needs to be replaced, right? So if you're an F-level furniture, you are leaving the area first and getting replaced. And then we just chip away and move up until we are confident that all of the furniture matches the learning environment that we want to have happen there. So our research is to investigate where we are K-8 with furniture, actually pre-K-8, in order to determine how do we prioritize what's most important. So that is what we will be doing over the course of the next year.
So in the 24-25 school year, we'll be researching new social emotional resources that we use during our class meetings, our flyer time, and our pack at the high school. And right now, at the elementary level, we are using a program called Second Step, and at the secondary level, we're using a program called Character Strong. So we'll just be doing a needs assessment, identifying gaps, what is our current reality, where do we want to be, possibly some field test lessons within those class meetings and advisory times built into the schedule, and evaluate and select some new resources. So our approach to social emotional learning in the district is very explicit and integrated. It's both. So we have explicit time through those advisory and class meetings, but we also work through the curriculum development process to integrate that within our lessons and the content that we teach. So we'll be continuing to look at those resources and seeing how they can serve us. And right now, I think that we are seeing that we have a really positive, we're having some positive outcomes with the things we're doing. So just continue to see where we can continue to grow and meet those individual student groups will be a big focus.
So these are just a few of the action steps for our first goal. If we transition to the next slide, you'll see our second goal, which is...
Why don't we pause there, and you guys got questions
Absolutely.
about that goal?
Can you remind me when throughout the school year the students take their social emotional screener? Is it a couple times?
Yes, it's 2 times a year. They take it in October and then end of February through March.
All right, moving on to our second goal, which is all about standards-based learning, linking that guaranteed and viable curriculum to the achievement and growth data of our students. So like our first goal, most of this is continuing. The areas in bold are things that have changed or been added that we really want to highlight. The second bullet is probably a very big add for us in this area. We talk about growth and that growth is a priority as a district, but we have not actually had a measurable growth target that we have been using with our principals. We've been drilling down individually to students, but we haven't looked at it as a whole. And so we looked at our data from this past, actually not this year, because when we were writing these goals, we don't have the spring data yet, and you need fall to spring data to determine the growth over the course of the year. Last year's growth showed that we had about 62% of our students who were in the average, high average, or high rates of growth. So anytime you're over 50%, that's great, but that is not our goal. We want to continue to stretch and grow. So we spent a lot of time evaluating where we think a reasonable goal is. It's going to continue to push us to support our students, and so we're aiming for 70% of our students to meet the average, high average, or high quintile for growth in both math and reading going into this next year. And again, that's one of those things we'll be able to report out when we report in July on our student achievement data. So we'll include that metric into that.
Can I ask a question? Are you looking at 70% in math and 70% in English, or are you saying all of our students will be at 70% in both?
So
individual student?
ideally, yes, right? So it's a yes and. We will look at it by math and English, but you would hope that that is universal, that the kids are growing in that same way. Going back to what Jill said earlier, we always want to be at 100%, right? But this is our next best step moving forward to make something that is both realistic and will stretch us to continue this work.
I have a question too. Do you know, you might not know off the top of your head, and this is probably more of a July workshop question, but is the spring usually kind of our highest growth? I know, so as a parent, when I see my kids, they actually perform the best on their fall assessment and the worst on their spring. And I was just curious if that's kind of a trend that's maybe not just my kids. And you don't have to answer that, like, I'm just thinking out loud. I'm just wondering if like the 3 times a year, is there a little bit of burnout at that third assessment?
I think one of our challenges is that it is not the only assessment we do in the spring, so that is definitely a challenge. At the same time, we want to see what the full spectrum of the school year's learning is. So we've talked about that before, and we've played with the idea of, which tests do we do first? Do we do NWEA first, or do we do MAP first? Because there is some exhaustion that happens there. But I think to your point about the fall assessment, that's one of the other things we could potentially look at is what's happening over multiple years, right? We're spending a lot of our time right now looking at fall to spring, but that doesn't mean we're looking at it from spring to spring, right? Or so continuing to measure that. But the growth measures aren't always the percentiles, right? They're what you actually would expect the student to attain on those scale scores. The next highlighted area I have is actually highlighted because it's not a change. So I know that sounds a little bit wonky. It says 100% of, I'm sorry, no, I'm reading the wrong line. Secondary implementation of timeline and action steps to develop proficiency skills within 3 years. We actually said 3 years last year as well. So in the whole timeline of events, we should be saying 2 years. However, as we talk in the action steps, there is a reason why we're keeping it at 3 years. We're giving ourselves more time to develop the micro school that we'll talk about in the next round of slides. And then the final change that I want to highlight is as you know, we have been working on getting the right test to the right student at the high school level to support their post-secondary goals and desired outcomes. So last year we were aiming for 85% of high school seniors to take the appropriate college readiness. We really just did a lot of coaching this year to try to get students to take the appropriate assessment. Next year, we actually have put into place a universal assessment opportunity for all of our juniors so that we can get to the point of 95% of students are taking the appropriate assessment. So some key changes that are important with this particular slide. All right, so let's go to the action steps on the next slide.
All right. As you know, the 6th grade core classes this year switched over to a standards-based reporting system, which has, I think the big picture is it's gone very well. We've had a lot of lessons learned along the way that will be very helpful as we roll that up to 7th grade next year. But from the teaching and learning side, we have really seen a lot of growth in our students and in our teachers in using those proficiency skills and reporting out in that way. So next year, the report card will roll up with those students to 7th grade, and so they will not have letter grades in 7th grade. They'll be getting those standards-based scores, and that will also apply to their elective courses next year. So 6th and 7th grade electives will be reporting out based on standards. And then at the 8th grade level, and this rolls a little bit into the second item up there as well. In 8th grade, our 8th grade teachers have done a lot of the work of developing proficiency scales. Their standards have been prioritized for some time, but they will still be reporting out on an A through F scale next year and for the foreseeable future. So the 8th through 12th grade scale is going to stay as a traditional grade scale. But what we will continue to do, and that's our second item up here, is we'll continue to work with our 8th through 12th grade teachers to prioritize their standards, which again, that work is done, but it always helps to revisit those as you're starting to look at how we're going to assess them in a standards-based system. And they will develop proficiency scales to really clarify what the different performance levels look like for each of those priority standards. While we will still have a traditional grade book, there'll be a great teaching tool for students and for teachers to give them that feedback on where they are in their learning and what they need to do to reach the next level of learning. One thing that we have observed, and Tara was sharing an example of this today, is that feedback from teachers and students has been supportive of the proficiency skills, especially in the area of enrichment, of getting to that level 4, of what is it going to look like to go beyond what's expected of me in this grade level. And so we're looking forward to continuing that work, and I think clarifying that for our teachers too, of what opportunities can you give students and what enrichment you can give them in that 4th level. So the reason that we have kept the timeline to 3 years is because it takes a lot of conversations really at the PLC level among those teachers to dig deep and say, we've said these are our priorities. What does that actually look like? We've got high quality assessments. They can pull from those, but the calibration that has to take place among a large group of teachers who, we may have, for example, 8 teachers who are teaching geometry. And so for them to come to consensus and then also make sure that they are adapting their assessments to measure on those scales to give good feedback to students, it just takes a lot of time. And so we have found as we've worked through with 6th grade and 7th grade, we want to make sure that we are not rushing things and that they're not pumping out these scales that may or may not work, but that they have time to really pilot them and tweak them before they are fully implementing them. Any questions about that?
I do have a question about that. So if the 8th graders are going to be doing both standards, but they're getting grades, how do you correlate them together?
Yeah, so we have quite a few teachers that are doing this already. And really what it means is that they've got their standards and their skills, and they're using those as tools to help their students understand. When I give you an assessment and you see, oftentimes the standards identified there on the assessment this is what I'm looking to measure, but they are still assigning a traditional grade, a number of points on the sections of those assessments. And so it's a bit of a hybrid. It's the students are understanding, I need to do this to master that standard, but it's still going to come back to me with a numerical point value on it that goes into the grade book.
So is an A meeting the expectations, or is an A exceeding the expectations?
That's the big conversation we need to keep having, because there are some strong opinions on that in both directions. And so that's why we want to take some time with 8th through 12th grade to make sure that we have a consistent way of doing that, and that we are not incentivizing students either to stop at the level 3 or to, try to do what historically might have been extra credit to get to that level 4. So the goal is to make sure all the way through that the learning is meaningful and that students are always pushed to perform at their highest level. And so that is what is going to also take time along with developing the skills is what is that translation to a traditional grade? Fortunately, we do have a lot of teachers that have been doing this for a few years that have come up with kind of their own systems and formulas for doing it that largely have been really effective, and I think students have been receptive to that, so we've got some models to start with.
I was just thinking of the spaghetti mess that might be from the different levels and courses and stuff, so thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
So the third line item on the slides is something we're going to continue to implement. So multi-tiered systems of support, or MTSS, is what you'll hear it called most often when you're talking to people throughout the district, is something that we're going to continue working on. It's really, in my opinion, one of, at the heart of all of the work in making sure that our students meet these goals that we've set out on our compass for academics and for social emotional, actually. And so one of the things that we started doing actually 3 years ago when I came into the district is Dr. Lawson and I created a district coalition that focuses on that multi-tiered system of support. And it consists of staff and administrators from each of the buildings. We've been able to do a lot of work providing some professional development opportunities for teachers and administrators in the district, both in-house and by bringing in outside experts or sending people to conferences to really focus in on what those structures are that we need to have in place in our buildings to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all students so that they can meet the goals that we've set out. Another thing that we've done and are going to continue to work on is we have a district rubric we created that's aligned with some of those best practices that we're looking for in each of the buildings. And what we've done is through that coalition, we've been able to have administrators and those teams of teachers kind of self-evaluate where they're at with the things that we would like to see happening. And then they're able to monitor their growth over time and identify those strengths and opportunities that they have that they need to work on in their buildings. And so really moving forward, we're going to continue that work of making sure that each building has the structures in place to support all of our students so that they can meet the outcomes that we're expecting to see. And then in addition to that, some things that we are investigating through our multi-tiered system of support is looking at the intervention resources that we have available. So we've been able to work with those math TAs that we were able to get to provide additional support for students who need help with math, and then also just looking at resources, potentially curricular resources through reading and mathematics to make sure we have that kind of seamless instruction from that tier 1, which is that core instruction that all students get, all the way up through more of those higher levels of support, which you would probably hear called like tier 2 or tier 3 supports for individual students.
All right, and then we continue to research how we can grow programs for students. You guys are aware, in January, we shared with you the work of our embedded credits and academies task force at the high school. A lot of work has gone into researching and investigating what is possible. And I teased it out earlier when I said we need 3 years. We need 3 years to develop proficiency scales, and that does correlate with the timeline that we have drafted through the task force for the development of a micro school at the high school. We're going to air quote it micro school. I'm sure we'll call it something else at some point. Kind of like we did with the Gifted Center, we eventually transitioned it to the Idea Center. Similarly, we'll do that with the micro school. But it's really this opportunity to create a unique experience for our students where they have agency to design their learning and to ensure that they really have a program for learning that is connected back to standards and supported by teachers. We've had the opportunity to see some great examples in Kettle Moraine of schools that focus in on topics like global studies or performance-based learning experiences. So through our task force, our micro school is being developed so that students are able to work with teachers. So it would be core teachers plus a couple of elective teachers for up to 5 periods of the day. They can be at any point throughout the day, but up to 5 periods of the day to really design interdisciplinary experiences where they articulate, these are the standards I need to learn for English 2, for example. I'm going to marry those standards with some of my standards from physical science, and I'm going to create this learning project for myself. It might be service learning, it might be a performance, it might be a global study, it might be connected to an internship working with an outside agency. So there is a lot of open-endedness to what is possible here for students. It would be married then with teacher seminars where they are really teaching specific content that students need in order to grow their instructional knowledge, their background knowledge, in order to do the work that is connected with their personally designed products. Again, we have seen this happen in districts across the United States. We've seen things similar within the state of Missouri as well. We have 6 teachers who, over the course of this next year, are going to use their 6th area of responsibility to design what this experience will look like. There's a lot of work still to do in the development of it, and obviously we need to have it ready to go before the Navigator comes online in January so that students know that this is something that is accessible to them. So we have been already starting to work through what does professional learning look like for the 6 teachers who are involved in the development of this. How are we structuring our team meetings? Colin would love to hear me say this. We're going to have a project management approach. There you go, I did that just for you, Colin. So that we make sure that we hit all of those timelines that we need, because this is starting out pretty messy, and we've got to take it from messy to very clear, very well articulated, so that when students determine that this is something that they want to do, they know exactly what it is that they are going to be doing. So our implementation date is to start in the 25-26 school year with sophomores only. There were lots of entry points we could have taken into this. We could have started with freshmen. Freshmen, however, are still learning what does high school look like. So they need a different level of structure than sophomores, for example. We could have started with juniors or seniors. However, to Ronnie's point earlier, there is a lot of work in the development of proficiency scales. Juniors and seniors have a slew of course options available to them. So the reality of having all of those proficiency scales, which are needed in order for students to demonstrate that they have mastered a skill, creating that number of proficiency scales within a year is not a likely thing to happen. Sophomores, for the most part, 5 of their courses look pretty much uniform across all of the content areas. So hence the reason why we're starting with sophomores. Then in the following year, we will add that sophomore class, we'll move on to be juniors, and the program will continue for them. So it will ramp up each year until they are seniors, and then in the 4th year of implementation, that's when we would fold in the freshman opportunity to join, once we've really solidified and make sure we have the structures in place for our freshman students. So this is going to be an opportunity for students to really create their learning experience, have agency, model all of those Lindbergh Life success skills that we talk about, and do it in a way that really fits individual student needs. It is very much a personalized learning experience for our students. That one's probably going to have some questions. Megan?
Okay, I think mine's a two-part question.
Okay.
So for the programs that you've seen working, about how many students are utilizing these programs? Like, if there's like a comparison to like how big their district is, and, I mean, if you don't have those numbers.
I have them
a thought.
approximately. So I would say Kettle Moraine, which is the primary model that we're looking to. There's other ones that we're pulling pieces in. They have a high school similar in size to ours, and they have multiple micro schools. And within the two that look most similar to what we're creating, it's about 100 students per school. So I would say they're sitting at about 10% in the type of programming that we are creating.
And so with that, is that a similar number that you would like to see Lindbergh be able to provide for their students? Or is it one of those things where like there will be a cap, or there's limitless access, or?
We have
still
not
some-
talked about a cap. In those programs we've seen, there's not it's students. A lot of it is you have to really market it well so students know, is this the right fit for me? Because one of the things that I think is most important in the development of this is that students are successful. If you are a student who really struggles with organization and maybe not, maybe you struggle with organization because you don't have control over organization, right? There's so many different nuances to who's the right fit for this. So any student would be eligible for it. It's just making sure that it is set up to be appropriate for their strengths. So with that, I don't know that there's a cap, especially knowing that we will be growing it over the course of 4 years. This first year, it'll be smaller, obviously, than when we have multiple grade spans within it. So that has not been a full discussion yet about how, would we get to a point where we would cap it? I don't think so, because if it's the right fit for a kid, it's the right fit for a kid. Yeah, you're welcome. Rachel?
I have two questions. First, is this, so the sophomores that choose to do it their sophomore year, if they decide this isn't the right fit for me, then they can, as a junior, go back into the more traditional class programming. Similarly, then maybe as a senior, they could opt back in again? Is
Correct.
this something that'll be flexible
Correct.
year to year? Okay.
One of the things that's going to be really important, though, because they're going to be attaining their credits differently. Like, in the end, their transcript won't look any different than a student who's been through traditional courses, right? Like, you still are going to get grades for courses, but because students are creating their learning experience, they might, at the end of first semester, have already finished all of their English competencies or mastered all of those standards, and they've earned that credit, but they still have all of science still to do from the entire year. So that commitment for a year is really important because we have to make sure students actually get the credit attainment in the time frame that's going to make sure that they're ready to enter back into traditional classes.
And then when you mentioned, I guess it was Kettle Moraine, if that, and some of the other schools some of them have multiple micro schools. Is that because maybe one is performing arts focused, one is more science focused, or what does that mean?
So that particular school that we visited had three. They had a high school of health sciences, they had a global, and they had a perform. We believe that two of those can be merged together into, again, if students are personalizing what that experience looks like, the basic framework was pretty similar. So definitely we want to have success with this and then consider if there are other opportunities for us to grow. I would say also that as part of this task force, there were other areas that the task force was really interested in. How do we get increased internship opportunities for all of our students and potentially flex the schedule so that students can do internship hours when it's the right fit for who they're interning with, not just because I have 6th and 7th hour free to do internships. So there are lots of layers to this that are even beyond what we talked about with the micro school. How do we get core classes at the high school more connected to real world clients? That's where you see that client connected projects. How do we get increased opportunities for that? So even for students who may desire a more structured environment, making sure we're breaking down those barriers of what happens in school versus what happens in the workplace.
I thought of one more question,
Yeah.
sorry. Have you looked at, or have you learned from the other schools that are already doing this, what is how much staffing difference is there? Because I would think this would require more staffing, or maybe not, I don't know.
I have not seen that there is more staffing required for this because the teachers just work differently. They really serve as facilitators, as coaches, as mentors. They're still teaching. They teach seminars and so forth, but they're really working with students to make sure that their projects are aligning to curricular expectations and then supporting their learning and growth there. So I've not seen that. We'll see. The first year might be a little tricky with that because, again, you're not in full implementation. And I do want to remind you, we're looking at programs that have been in place for 15 years. So we're looking at the end result after significant iterations. So as we start and develop our own, we'll probably have some of those learning curves that we will have to work through.
And I also kind of attribute it to like the CAPS program. So the CAPS is slowly growing. I think our CAPS numbers are, for next year, are the highest they've been. So again, it's that marketing, it's the kids learning about it. Rachel, I could possibly, if enrollment, the first year to kick it off, if it's not there, we might have to add some sections here or there, but over the long run, it probably should not cost more staffing. We might have to have somebody pick up an additional section or something like that.
Tara, you just sort of glossed over the seminars, but that was actually a really important piece of it to me. Can you just explain to everybody what those are? What that means?
Yes, so what the teachers, one of the things that's really important and that we'll need to work through in our development is the tracking of where students are. So as I said, teachers are coaches, they're facilitators, they're mentors for the students. They're also tracking student credit attainment, right? They're looking at where are the gaps, what exists, as they notice patterns, okay, well, here we are. This is sophomore level U.S. history. We're noticing that no one is hitting the standards associated with the Civil War. Now, I'm going to, as a teacher, schedule seminars to do some direct instruction. Students then put those seminars into their calendar. So there's a lot of executive functioning skills for students to be able to manage their time and realize, oh, I haven't achieved that standard yet. I need to attend this seminar or this series of seminars with this particular teacher to make sure that I have the opportunity to demonstrate that I have learned this content and I know it in order to earn the credit.
I can
Rachel.
see students who like to play games really loving this because they would totally gamify this and be like, I met my goal, I met my goal.
How does this, or again, with the schools that have already been doing this, how does this work with AP credits and those kinds of tests?
We met with some students today, and they were asking the exact same questions. It was really fun to get our first round of feedback from students on this. It depends, is the answer. If there are enough students within the micro school to create an AP class, then that will happen. Or students, as I said earlier, students could take up to 5 classes in the micro school. So if I'm a student and I really want to take AP U.S. history, which actually is a junior level class, AP government, let's use that example. I used history before, I was wrong, that's junior level. If I really want to take AP government and there are not enough students in the micro school to do that, then I would maybe take only four of my sections in the micro school and then take AP government in the traditional experience. So one of the advantages that we have is that this would be a program housed within our own building. So for students to be able to flex throughout their school day between the micro school and traditional classes would be very seamless.
I mean, this is this really gets to the heart of what we've been talking about the last 5 or 6 years around personalized learning and helping students, be there on their side and guiding them, telling them this is what you got to learn, but how you demonstrate that is what we've been talking about, and we're getting close. So got some work still to do, but it's exciting.
So we will keep you updated. Like I said, there's a lot of work to do, a lot of professional learning to do, and a lot of decisions to be made. All right, our next and final slide.
So I want to give a little bit of context to what that is, talking about artificial intelligence. So for us, our students are going to be using something called AI Chat, and that is similar to ChatGPT if you've used that, but it's going to be filtered and it's specifically made for K-12 education. I want to give you 2 examples to help you, again, frame a little bit of what this could look like. So we had a 2nd grade student, staff member student, try on a staff member's iPad this AI Chat. And we helped him with a prompt, and he's 7 3/4, and he's really interested in robotics. So we typed all that into the AI, but because he was so excited about it, he didn't use any spaces in the words. And normally if you put that into like Google or one of our databases, it's gonna come back with like no results. But the amazing thing about AI is it came back with a great result to say, so you're interested in robotics, that's really cool, and here are 3 ways to get started. One was really high-end with a Raspberry Pi, and the other was showing them how to use Legos to get started. So going back to that personalized piece, that he's interested in robotics, and now he has multiple pathways to follow. We've been working with one of our high school English teachers this year on just looking at and experimenting with AI, and after she saw this, her quote was, "This is something I can get behind." So leading up to this point, we've had professional learning around, like we had the unconference and multiple teachers were presenting at that, understanding how to use this. We've done PLCs and small groups around getting ready for this day, and we just finished up one of our Lindbergh U courses. Going forward, today we met with our library media specialist, creating a plan of how we're gonna roll this out and how we're gonna support this, not only in the students, but also with the staff.
I just have a question because you kind of like compared it to like Google and using like library databases. So like what would this look like in the classroom, like on a like day-to-day basis?
So there's a lot of things, like one of them, like for example, for the high school that I was getting for ELA, that teacher was typing in some of the current things that they're working on now, like the formula students were writing with. So this would be, think of it almost as like a teacher would give, sorry, I'm stumbling a little bit, but the assignment was, I don't really remember, but it was something about comparing 2 pieces of writing together. And so some of her students were having struggling getting started with it. So this is a place to go and to type in some things. This is what I'm trying to accomplish. Here's what I'm struggling with. And it gives prompting ideas, but it won't write the paper for you, unlike other AIs will do. Does that help a little bit, or?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think it's important to note also that as Colin's been studying this and advocating for, this is an emerging technology. This is what our students are going to be using in their future and in the place of work. So we need to make sure that it is part of what we are teaching them in terms of how they work here as well. But our limitation has been on data privacy. Much of the AI tools are not compliant with what we need to do to protect student privacy. So the Chat for Securely option really gives us that opportunity to do both things, to protect our students' data and then also provide them structures and tools to start using AI appropriately.
That was my question, was the safety. So thank you for that. And then there's fear, right? There's always fear from parents or people who aren't quite sure about immersing themselves in this. So, yeah, I'm sure you have ways to deter that or talk about it.
Laura, one of the other cool things that we've experimented with, just testing this all out and how it can be used in the classroom as well, is especially for students who may struggle with executive functioning, like getting started on a project, thinking about students who may have a diagnosis of ADHD and they have all these wonderful ideas. It's just to get going. And so putting in a project that a teacher said, like, I need to do this project, give me some steps to begin, and it will literally break down, start here, and take them step by step. So this is really a great, a tool for inclusion and making sure that students can use it to help support that learning, those big projects, and chunking down, different large tasks.
I think it's important to not be afraid of the fact that students could cheat. Oh no, well, students can cheat right now. And so I think it's a really great opportunity to teach them how to ethically use this technology in a way that can help them and still help them learn instead of just doing the assignment for them, which is what I think everybody hears AI and they're like, well, nobody's gonna do their homework anymore. This is just gonna be, a chatbot. I have a fun sticker that says, I'm not a chatbot. I might be a chatbot. I should put that on this. But I'm excited that you guys are doing this because I think it's important that our students are growing into this world because we can't stop AI. It's coming and it's important that they know how to use it.
I would also agree with that, and I love to hear that you're addressing the privacy concern because there is a lot of issues with privacy and artificial intelligence. I also want to know, are you thinking about from the terms of bias? Because there's a lot of bias in coding. And so just making sure that we're aware of that, and I see Colin is perked up, so I'm sure he's going to address it. So
So this comes at a perfect time because our library media specialist just returned from MASL, the state conference around libraries and library sciences, and that is definitely one chunk of what we talked about today, but also helping our students understand that, especially with the election cycle coming up. So all these things I feel it's a perfect time. Everything is just aligning, and we have real world examples to help illustrate this.
And then my other question is, so this is an AI that's both student and teacher facing, is that correct? Are you researching any teacher-only facing AI to help teachers do their job, or just different things in terms of from the teacher perspective, not just the student perspective?
Absolutely. We've been looking for roughly about 18 months at all the different types of things out there. One of them, like Brisk, is something that looks interesting, but again, digging a lot into the privacy pieces of this. That's why with AI chat through Securely, that's one that we found that will protect the students' privacy and the teacher's privacy. But that's the biggest struggle that we have currently right now. Things look amazing, but then when you dig into it, there's things that we just cannot use.
And this is just for the audience that may be watching this at home, remind people what Securely is and what it does for us.
Absolutely. So Securely is our web filter. So anytime a student is using it, any of our devices here and at home, everything will be filtered through our content filter, which is the parent company is Securely, among other things that it does for us.
My turn. My topic is not exciting nor scary. I'd like to talk to you about, we are building a model of instruction for our teachers. So picture, if you will, a giant toolbox, and we've taken all the effective instructional practices and we've thrown them in the toolbox. Now we've partitioned the toolbox up into 7 areas, which are clear learning goals, using assessments, direct instruction, deepening knowledge for all learners, engagement strategies, rules and procedures, and building relationships. So we've taken each one of those, and then we're going to, this summer, we have a team of teachers and admin coming in, and we're gonna write a proficiency scale for each of those design areas. So that will kind of unpack, what does it mean to properly use engagement strategies in your classroom? So then teachers will have a nice little scale of, so they will be able to know through self-assessment and through feedback from their administrators, what are their strengths and where are areas they need to grow. And this will then drive their personalized professional learning. So they'll know, oh, I need to do better at this, I need to learn about this, I need to sign up for sessions on this. And then in turn, when they get better at effective instructional practices, we will see increased student achievement. And we refer to it as the MOI, and is based on the work of Robert Marzano, but we are going to take his work and make it better. And Dr. Lake has been asking for this for 6 years, and I keep telling him, I'm working on it.
We've been busy.
Yes, you all have been very busy, but it is important for us to have a consistency of what does good instruction look like in our school district, and what does that look like in the 3rd grade classroom at Concord and the 3rd grade classroom at Crestwood. So having that consistency is really, really important.
And finally, we are investigating, we have a problem that we need to solve. We need to find a good software system that will help us manage professional learning. I'm going to give you an example. One of our goals is that we expect all of our K through 3rd grade teachers to be trained in letters within the first 3 years. The only way we know that is because Sarah Valter keeps a spreadsheet. And there are a multitude of examples of things like that where we say there's a foundation of learning that we want to ensure that all of our teachers have. And we don't have a really good system to track that and to pull when people need specific professional learning. So we need a tool that's going to help us with that. So that is it for teaching and learning. Thank you.
I think that's $1 million. For anybody who wants to create that, right? All right, next is Dr. McKenney with Human Resources.
And I'm going to stand because you have this here, and I just thought I'd take the accommodation since I've been having some back issues, so hope you don't mind.
Love it.
I was going to have my team here, but they're all completing applications to join the teaching and learning department, so I'm here with myself tonight. So thank you for having me. So to start, We have, again, several things we're highlighting. This doesn't at all encompass our entire list of goals, but we wanted to highlight a few for you this evening. On the recruitment side, we break down our work into three main goals. We talk about retention of staff, recruitment of staff, of course, and then serving the staff and making sure that employee well-being and employee satisfaction is top of mind. So each of these things will fall under one of those three umbrellas. The first one is the teacher ambassadorship program. So more and more recruitment fairs, they used to be pretty generic, and it would be a recruitment fair and you would go and there would just be lots and lots of people there and long lines, and they weren't super productive. And they've started to become more specialized. So we've had the Black Male Educators is a group that hosts a recruitment fair. I'm going to talk here in a few minutes about the partnership we have with 3 other districts that started this year. I can see a time where we may have a student services recruitment fair where we only invite people that are interested in counseling, social work, college and career preparedness. We may have a STEM recruitment fair. So as we move forward and that trend continues, we want to take people to these fairs that are teachers in those positions or teachers that reflect what the audience that we're presenting to. So oftentimes I go or a principal goes, and we're talking to, let's use a college recruitment fair for instance. A 21-year-old pre-service teacher is talking to an older gentleman like me about what it's like to be a teacher at Lindbergh School District. Well, I'm probably not the best person to talk about that. I can talk about a lot of things, but we think it would be much better if we had a brand new teacher fresh out of college in their first year that could sit behind that table and say, hey, I'm in my first year at Lindbergh. This is what it looks like. This is why you should come and work here. So we're going to look at our list of fairs. We're going to handpick some teachers, give them some training, get them some release time, and take those people to these fairs so that the people we're trying to recruit see themselves on the other side of the table, not just administrators. So we think that's got a lot of promise. And then the next is it's in green, it's ongoing, but I wanted to highlight it because if you would go to the next slide, Colin, please. This year we had our first partnered recruitment fair. We partnered with Maplewood, Richmond Heights, Webster Groves, and Kirkwood. Kirkwood hosted this year, and the reason I'm highlighting is, number one, Drs. Mason and Cavato were on the ground floor of this. They were part of the steering committee that developed this partnership, and it went very well at Kirkwood. The exciting thing is this coming year, we're going to host it at Lindbergh High School. So that'll be a neat way to show off our brand new facility, and we've got some really cool ideas to kind of spread people out and make this more of a personalized, individualized, hey, if you're counselors, you're in this room, and if you're STEM people, you're over here. So we're really looking forward to that, and that's going to be a continued program that will rotate through the 4 districts and hopefully continue because it's been effective. Any questions about those 2 recruitment highlights before I move on? If not, these 2 are about retaining, and we're going to talk a little bit about retention of our support staff. So we do, I think, a very good job, and data shows that, of providing opportunities for career advancement and leadership with our education and instructional staff. We have the Teacher Academy led by Dr. Sparks. We have the Aspiring Principals Academy that I oversee. What we'd like to do is take this work and put it into the non-instructional support staff side, and this year Jamie has been researching and will continue this research in Support Staff Leadership Academy, so a similar opportunity for our support staff people. What's Kansas City School that does this that we are going to see that I can't remember now? It's not Blue Valley, it's Blue Springs. Thank you. Blue Springs implemented this, and so we've got a model to go off of. So this summer, my executive director of human resources will be going to Blue Springs to
Just so the audience knows out there, we moved Dr. Cavato from Executive Director of HR to the Executive Director of Secondary Schools, and Dr. McKinney's having a little bit of a problem with it, it looks like.
You missed my opening salvo when you stepped out. But we will researched that, and it's really gonna be, it's a really cool idea, and I love the idea of our support staff people thinking, you know, this is not a dead-end job, this isn't, maybe I have interest in something else and I can learn some about leadership, and I have an opportunity for career advancement here at Lindbergh. And they don't have to go somewhere else to advance their career. The other piece, the finance department and HR department are joining on this one, and we are going to hire an outside group to come and help us do a classified market study for salary rates. And the reason this is important is we have a lot of access to classified salary rates in the K-12 world, but we're not competing at the non-instructional side. Support staff, we're not competing with just K-12s, we're competing with the entire market. And so we're going to do a classified market study. Other districts have done this and it's gone very well, and they've of course shared some of that data, but we want to know who are we competing with and how do our salary rates compare in custodial, in office professionals and that kind of thing. So it'll be interesting to see what comes from that.
Can I add quick to that?
Please do, please do.
For the budget side of that, you're all probably saying, oh gosh, how much is that gonna cost? But we're looking at partnering with several other schools who are looking to do the same thing, because like you said, we can always get a lot of data on teachers' salaries, but it's hard to get data on support staff. So we're going to share the cost. There you go.
Yes, collaboration, always a good thing. You can go to the next slide, please, Colin. Craig Hamby he left, I saw him run out of here as soon as he was done. He stole a little bit of my thunder on this one, but we have started this year in December. We started our realignment for our education evaluation tool. Long overdue, it's about 10 years old, the one we're currently using. It doesn't properly reflect the great work that our teachers are doing, so it's really a hard instrument to use to make a statement about proficiency of teaching. And so if you'll go to the next slide, in December 2023, so this middle of this year, we established the task force, had our initial meeting. There have been monthly meetings since. We identified why we were doing this, how we were going to do it. As Dr. Hamby mentioned, it's based on the Improving Teacher Development and Evaluation process from Marzano. We have talked with our group about the process, the timeline, the requirements. My side of it is I'm in charge of making sure that while we're dreaming big, we're still compliant with DESE, because there are some very specific, there's actually a Senate Bill 291 that governs how we evaluate educators in the state of Missouri. So no matter what we come up with, it still has to comply with the rules from Senate Bill 291. Craig talked about the instructional model. He explained that very well, so I can skip over that piece. We are going to this summer have teachers developing the proficiency scales, and then we're going to try and shoehorn this instrument into our TalentEd software, which is how we digitally process teacher evaluations. So it's a big project, but it's really gone well. Tara and I have been co-chairing this, so to speak, and we've made a lot of really great progress, and the teachers, I feel like, are completely on board. And if you'll go to the next slide, for the future, so next year is our pilot year. The principals and teachers currently on the task force will use this instrument next year with a constant feedback loop. And then I'll be working with calling, probably more than working with, calling and asking permission from Paul Katnick to let us use it. And then September 25, the following school year, is our implementation year. We'll be training all principals this summer, and then next year we'll be training all staff. The good thing about the instrument, the one we have is this way too, it doesn't have to stay the same for it. You know, once you produce it, it doesn't have to then just be that way forever. It's each year we can tweak it and we can work it, and we'll be getting feedback from teachers constantly. So it's never set in stone. Any questions about the teacher evaluation renewal process?
I do. I have a question, Brian.
Sure.
When you go through this self-development and you're tracking it and teachers are learning and they're growing themselves, is there like, who's there, are they gonna have coaches or mentors to kind of partner with and talk about these things? Or a lot of times in the corporate world, you take the class and then that's it. You just don't use it and you just kind of forget it. So I don't know if you have an answer for that yet, but that would be what I would be interested in knowing, is what happens after you've developed yourself.
Tara grabbed her microphone, so she has a comment.
So she's a,
I mean, this is the professional learning work. Earlier this year in February, we met with our professional learning team, representatives from each of the buildings, and we really tried to narrow down and prioritize what was most essential in professional learning, because there's a million things we all know are important to support students. And effective teaching practices came out number one from both elementary and secondary, which is the baseline for everything that's in our teacher evaluation tools. So that'll be the work of our coaches, that'll be the work of our principals, the work of growing our teachers. And then to Craig's point earlier, how we start to use that to transform what professional learning looks like for teachers, so that when we have sessions, we're really offering the variety of things that people need to support their growth opportunities.
The one thing I would say that is really interesting, I think, and exciting about this new, right now it's I'm gonna come into your classroom and it may be scheduled, it may not. I'm gonna see a snapshot of what you do and then I'm gonna make some judgments about that. This is more of like, Craig talked about the toolbox. The principals are gonna be detectives really, and they're just gonna spend an entire year collecting evidence that people are using the tools in that toolbox effectively. And that can be through submitting artifacts. It doesn't have to be something they saw. It can be through something that the teachers turn in. It can be surveys, self-assessment. So there's a lot of different ways to collect this evidence. And they will slowly fill this out throughout the year, rather than I'm going in for a 45-minute thing and that's the last time that we're going to have a formalized evaluation. So I think it'll be much more of a true, effective, and it'll be a constant loop feedback, observation feedback over time. A little bit like what we're doing with students, with just not having the one
That's exactly what I was
shot.
gonna say. It's personalizing that for our staff, and we've talked about that for the last 5 or 6 years. How do we help our professionals grow and meet their potential? And you can't do that if it's a cookie cutter, one size fits all. You gotta have a sandbox and parameters to allow that to happen, and that's what we're hoping this new evaluation tool will do. So make it meaningful.
Next slide, please. So Randy Jemerson, his team, security team, joined us this year, and it really makes perfect sense because we have Jessica and the nursing staff with our team, and so safety and security go hand in hand. And so these are just a couple, but you're going to see, if you look at our Compass plan, you're going to see an entire section that's really just about goals that Randy will be focused on and Jessica will be focused on. I just need to move closer to it, sorry. Just a couple that I'll highlight. The district-wide crisis response plans. Every building has these, but it's time that we revisit. In May at the administration retreat, Randy will give the principals kind of this is what an ideal crisis plan for a building should look like, and the principals then will have the summer to go back, revisit theirs, compare what they have to what Randy says is the ideal. And then when we come back for our August administrative retreat, each principal is going to share what their plan looks like now after their summer revisions and updates. So really shoring those up. And then the elementary SRO, I know you've heard about that already, but that's very exciting. And this will be the implementation year for our third SRO, and he'll be focused at the elementary. So that's exciting too. And then one research piece that has to do with well-being, we have pharmacy has gotten super, super expensive. It is what's driving the problems we're having with our medical fund. It's really not about procedures and things. It's all about pharmacy. And so we've challenged our broker to look for cost-saving solutions. There are some already in place, but there are many more that we can access. One that's already in place is called RX and Go, and it's a mail-in pharmacy supply. And basically, if we use them, the district's cost for pharmacy is cut way down, and the cost to employees for most medicines is zero. They don't even have a copay. So that's just one example of some cost-saving solutions that are out there, and we need to be taking advantage of those. And once we know they're there, then we have to educate the teachers and the staff on their existence, because people get into habits and sometimes those are hard to change. And so I was the RX and Go guy last year. I even wore a t-shirt one time to our meeting. So you can ask me about RX and Go was my deal. So we're going to be working on that, and we hope that's helpful to our medical fund issue. And then finally, I just want to tell a quick story, if you'll go on to the next slide. I'm not going to ask Colin to click on this, but after the pandemic, we did quite a bit of surveying of our staff about well-being, stress, happiness in the workplace, and we got mixed results on that. And I think every school district in America probably did, because it was a tough time to be a teacher. However, with that data, we partnered with a group that was located by our broker, and put some initiatives in place that have to do with well-being. We now have an advocate, a well-being advocate at every single building. And there's a story that you can click on, an article that is about Lindbergh. We're not named, but it says a school district in Missouri, and it talks about our survey, what we found, the initiatives we put in place, and then the results, which is in 2023, we were named a Healthiest Employers Award winner. And so it was really a major turnaround in the wellness and happiness of our staff at Lindbergh, and it has to do with Ann and Jessica and Jamie really putting a very intentional wellness program in place. And as you can see from the story that you can read whenever you'd like, it's a really cool story, and it is about Lindbergh. So.
We'll put that in the Friday packet for you. We'll put that in tomorrow so they can read it.
Yeah, so exciting stuff. And that's all I have, unless there are any questions. Thank you.
Communications is up next. Beth?
Look at that, Beth. You got all kinds of time. She's always saying, oh, I'm only going to have 5 minutes.
I know, I have lots of time. Well, thank you, everyone. So we had a little bit of a change to our overarching goal in the communications department through our strategic plan. We added engaging the community in specific and targeted ways to promote understanding, trust, and transparency. And I think that makes a lot of sense. It helps us give ourselves some things that we can measure. Also, you all know a lot of the feedback that we get from our listening and learning says, great job on communication, and also like, you could improve communication. So we know there's different ways we could do that. And part of it's just the volume. And so I think talking about the specific and targeted measures to improve communication has to do with just the volume and the 24/7 nature of the world we live in, and how we can filter through all the noise and get our families the information that they need. And then also make sure our community gets the information they need and understand. I talked with someone the other day who called me, a resident, and said, I'm not getting the print newsletter, and we're going through making sure that we can get that for them. But I said, I want you to know the information's also available online, and this happened to be a senior citizen. And he said, that's okay, but then I have to get in the car, drive to the library, get on the computer, and look it up. And so, just eye-opening and a reminder to me, all those different communication methods are important for the different people in our community, especially those who might not be as directly connected and still need to know what's going on and be informed. So moving to our first goal has to do with maintaining our strong brand identity and promoting our mission, our core beliefs in the community through our brand standards. We can go to the next slide. We highlighted 3 things that we'll be doing. The first, this should be green, I realized, because I had it on our Compass goals for last year, and we did not get to it, but we're moving into the last year of our contract for our website, and so this year is actually really good timing for us to put out a request for qualifications for website and communication services. So that includes our website, mass notification system, our mobile app, and really see what's out there since we last did this 5 years ago, what's changed. I've just in seeing different products people are using, I know there are a lot more capabilities that we can take advantage of. And then along with that, redesign our website to serve our families really well, and especially just being mobile friendly and bringing it up to 2024. So that will be one of our goals next year. We also want to really look, this will be some of the work we do this summer, but look around central office here, and we have a lot of visitors in this building. We have, of course, our board meetings, and so how do we communicate better through this space about our success measures, share evidence of student work. So we've talked about, for those of you who can go way back with me, we had a bulletin board outside of our old boardroom where the art teachers would come every month and staple up all the student artwork. And it was really nice because it rotated through. It's just a reminder of why we're here and what we're all about. And so exploring that idea to have student artwork here in a more modern way, but possibly even rotating it through with the monthly board recognition so we can have that that student work here. And then also looking at creating a second touchscreen like we have at Lindbergh High School out in the lobby here, where we would have all of our district information. So put our Lindbergh Leaders archive on with photos, our past superintendents, our district history, and just have a home for that information in a way that's more modern and really puts what we're proud of on display. So that is our second goal. And then last year we had researching best practices for branding and communicating our strategic plan. This year we moved it to implement. So we did look at different districts who had done this work and how they are telling their story. And now we're going to do that with our new 5-year strategic plan. The first artifact that we put in place was the strategic plan itself, and then the slide deck that Dr. Lake mentioned, and tying those Lindbergh Life success skills into the visual of our slide deck. So any questions on that first goal?
I just have to say, you have to have the yearbook thing, touch point, because people love going back and looking at their pictures and looking at their class and their classmates when they're 50+ years old.
I know, at the open house, that was the best thing, to see the line of people waiting to see their old.
The digital yearbooks have been very popular. And the nice thing about that display at the high school, it's available online also. So if you can't make it to the high school, all that content is available on a website, as would be here in the district. So, yeah.
I know that this is not what we're talking about, but since it's been brought up, is there any work being done on it being like more searchable? Just as someone at the open house that was scrolling all day for everybody and having a sore arm afterward.
Through the yearbook?
Yeah.
You have to, and that can be a discussion for another day. The back end, there's a lot of manual entering, and we had a certain amount of content we were able to put in as part of what we purchased, but it has to do with how we put keywords in. And so over time, yes. Yeah, just requires some, and that is one of our goals. It's not on here, but it's on our compass, is to maintain the high school displays. So Jason Wolford's been really taking on that project over there, and we've done pieces of it, but working with him to just make sure that that content stays up to date and that we can improve the features. So next slide is our second goal. So this speaks to the strategic and targeted communication, but all of those audiences we talked about, reaching out to them, making sure they understand the work that we're doing, all the things that you heard Tara and Brian and Joelle talk about tonight and their teams. It's great work, but we have to make sure people understand it and support it, and so that's where we come in with our goals. So go to the next slide. Our first goal is completing a communications audit to support those targeted and strategic measures. We did this after the last strategic plan was done, so it makes a lot of sense to 5 years later, let's do this again. We're going to bring in a third party who can look at all of our communications materials, do interviews with certain stakeholders in our community, and give us recommendations on how we can continue to improve what we're doing well, and then where we can continue to move forward with our communication practices. So we'll do that this fall. And then communication support for the Lindbergh Life Success Skills, which you will see here. That's really the cornerstone of our strategic plan and the work of our teaching and learning department. And so we want to make sure we're highlighting those success skills and continuing to do work so that it's easily identifiable, and we're supporting our teaching and learning team. So that's there really for all the, when we're going out, taking pictures, telling stories, are we tying it back to the success skills, and are we being intentional about that? And then our third goal has to do with our inclusion, equity, and diversity committee at the district level. We, through the communications subcommittee, will work to, our goal is to communicate the value of this work to our community, and also to show all of the different backgrounds and celebrations, and just tell the story of all the members of our community, and really be very deliberate and intentional about doing that, so that we are making sure that we include everybody in our communications, and also are highlighting the work that's happening around inclusion. And then our last one here is a more recent ad, but Dr. Lake and I were talking about this, and we felt like it was important to include. All of you are aware we've seen an increase in sunshine requests, and of course we are here as a public entity and we want to be as transparent as possible. Having said that, this year we've had about 52 sunshine requests. Last year I counted about 29. So we have seen an uptick in the number of people who are requesting records. Sometimes those records are something that's easily findable on board docs or the website. Other times, it does take a little more work to research, to process. So we want to continue to be very transparent and provide that information when it's requested, but we want to be mindful of how much time that's taking and the resources that are required, and just look at how other districts are handling this, because it's not something that's just happening in Lindbergh. This is a trend that we're seeing across school districts. So doing some talking to colleagues and just learning about how they're handling that as well. Any questions on this slide? Okay, well, if you move to the final goal for the communications department, is really speaks to community engagement. And so engaging our community in our programs and our work through just different opportunities to connect, coming to events, and ways to give back financially. That really ties into our Lindbergh Schools Foundation. And we'll go to the next slide, and our highlights through this section of our plan is one, next year is our school district's 75th anniversary, which is very exciting. And so we want to make sure that that ties through all of next year, the 24-25 school year, and everything that we do. So we are working to design a badge that can go on our logo, sort of like a logo with our logo, that we can put on, for example, our staff t-shirts, and put on our website and social media to really highlight this throughout the year. We're also working in our foundation office to talk about how do we celebrate this through, one, the events that already exist, like our alumni banquet, our community breakfast, our Lindbergh Leaders event, opening day, but also what can we do that's special? So October is the month when our school district was incorporated 75 years ago, and we already talked to the principals and said, we're still at the very early planning stages, but we'd love to have an event at every single school. We want to make this about the whole district. And the open house at the high school this spring was such a success, and we're already getting people asking all the time, when are you going to do that again? When can we come back to the high school? So we really want to bring all of that together and celebrate this anniversary with everybody in our community. So we're excited about that. Our second is for the Lindbergh Schools Foundation. Erica Keating has worked really hard on the Flyer Family Fund, which is our payroll deduction program for employees, where they can give a direct donation to the foundation. When she came on in 2019, we had about 10% of our employees who were giving, and we now have about 38% who are giving. So we've really seen an increase. They've gone from about $5,800 in donations a year through this program to $11,000 $680 a year. But as with anything that really increases quickly, we've seen this kind of plateau. And so Erica actually presented on this program at her national conference last month. And she said there were 3 or 4 school districts from around the country that presented on payroll deduction programs and for donations. And she learned a lot and she got some really good ideas. And so we're exploring some incentives that we can provide for staff. Erica has worked really hard to raise awareness of the foundation among our staff. And so just continuing to do that. But her goal is to continue to increase giving through that program. And just, it's really a nice way for our employees to give back to especially those who are receiving grants and give back to scholarships. So that is a goal for us. And then our final one we're going to highlight tonight is a carryover from last year as well. We carried over a handful of goals just due to our time being really focused over the past couple months on making sure people understand and were informed about our bond issue. And so a couple of our goals that we would have liked to maybe complete this year, we're going to carry over and give them the time that they deserve. And this is one of them. Our Senior Associates program is our community program for seniors we have it 4 times a year now at Truman Middle School. We bring seniors in, we have student entertainment. Dr. Lake comes and visits with them and speaks about different things. The picture on the slide was at our last program that had the middle school jazz band. And it was so fun. I mean, just to see all of them clapping and dancing and taking videos. And it's a great group. But I will say we've gone from about 200 seniors a month to about 60. And we don't want to see that this program continue to decline. So a couple of things we've done this year is we've worked with City of Crestwood, and they've come and shared information about their programs and provided us an avenue to go there and share information about our programs. We've talked to Sunset Hills about doing the same thing. But we're also just wanting to continue to build that engagement. And we do have an employee who's doing a thesis project for her degree about, and chose the topic of community engagement with our seniors. And she has some great ideas, so we're working with her. And really just, even watching the musical performances, we talked about how can we brand these differently. Like, of course, they're open to senior citizens, but these can be concerts for our entire community. We could do this in the high school auditorium and invite our seniors, but invite parents and invite friends of parents. And so we still really value our seniors, but the goal is connecting with people who don't spend time in our schools and aren't directly connected. And so we want to kind of think a little bit bigger about that and how we can continue to involve them and connect them. The other really neat thing that we did last month was we had Truman students come in and present on some projects they were doing. And we had a group of girls talk about how they were implementing reusable lunch trays to reduce waste. And then we had 2 other girls who built a robot from scratch, and they drove it down the middle of the gym for the seniors. And just seeing these kids, it's really energizing to see how they connect with our senior citizens. And so we want to keep providing those opportunities and expanding on it. So that is one of our goals. Any questions?
I have, 2 things. The first thing I just thought about when you were just talking about engaging seniors more, I know.
Uh-oh.
Do we need to pause? No.
Thunderstorm warning.
Okay. Okay. So I understand certainly the connection between the already existing events and having seniors be able to experience other things going on within the district at those specific events. But I know of my parents' retirement community, actually it was last year, on their own coordinated their little shuttle coming to several of the performing arts concerts. So that's something that if we were wanting to try and engage seniors at communities within the Lindbergh School District, even just sending out something at the beginning of the year with here are the opportunities that people could come. I know many of them thought it was just as good as going to the symphony and made a lot more sense.
That's a siren.
That's near us. That purple is right over Sunset Hills.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Rachel.
So we'll recess and come back when it's turn to present to us the most exciting budget goal and our money for the next year or so.
You have.
Until the next siren goes off. Okay. I know, I'll be quicker before that. I know, yeah. Okay. Well, I know that's gonna happen, so just wave and I'll be quiet. Okay. This is a big point in the year when we talk to the board about just goals for next year's budget. And again, I put on all these at this assumptions as of today because really none of our hard data about our primary revenue items come in until after we adopt the budget. That's just the way school finance works. And so we do a lot of estimating and then, of course, bring data to the board as more information is available and make amendments. So go ahead, Colin, you can move to the next slide. The primary goals, though, in our budgeting timeline, here's the first one. Well, there's a lot of work before this first one, but this is the first one where we're really sharing it out to other staff. And the work isn't just by myself and my business office team, but it's the buildings and department teams are all doing a lot of things to make this happen. We have a pretty good checklist, and we really start probably in January on items to get to this point. This is where we adopt, but we won't adopt the official budget until June, because this is kind of like the preliminary concept for you guys to mull over, and then we'll make the final updates to it and bring it to the board in June. Sometimes we do like to have a late second board meeting in June to finalize things if something happens in between the June board meeting and the end of the year. There are some transactions we can only do once a year, and sometimes we'll have a special meeting. As you know, each month we do have the Finance Advisory Committee, and they review our budget to actuals. We have a great committee. They ask a lot of questions, and we do have good conversations in there. We do have 2 board members that represent the board on that committee as well. This year, new, I did highlight it because it's an add to our budgeting timeline and some of the process changes we have in play for next year, because it's going to look a little bit different than it has in the past 5 years as far as what our goals are for the budget. Next slide. Budget development goals. Number 1, Beth kind of said it with her communication goals, is that we want to align with the district compass goals for each department and the building ones as well. Number 1 after the compass goals is make sure we have alignment is always fiscal responsibility and transparency. So these are the major things we think of when we move forward with our budget. At one time, it had said planning for enrollment growth. You know, we've had to change that to enrollment changes because it's a little bit different than it has been in the past. And fund balance and reserve management is a goal that is moving to the top of the goal list for next year. Next slide. That's why you'll see this, replenish operating fund balances. So I could have put that on the top as one of our goals, but as you know, in the past 5 years, we've really looked at strategically spending down fund balance because we've had excess fund balance, and we looked at one-time projects that would spend that down. And then we also had some major construction projects, and that happened in a COVID cycle, and it's time now to look at replenishing the fund balances for going forward. Go ahead, Colin.
Joel, can I just jump in there?
Yeah.
I just, like an example of one of those of a strategic spending down our fund balance that we had, the HVAC audit that Scott Barbagallo is just completing. You know, every day I would hear about heating and cooling issues across the district. And that was about close to $1 million one-time expense. But you know what? We don't hear those things anymore. Our systems were operating. We discovered through that process that some of them weren't installed correctly ever. And so you have to do those kinds of things. And now those systems, we feel really good about where they are. So we really believe a lot of those one-time expenses over the next 5 years or so are going to be less and less. So that's just an
Yeah,
example.
I agree with that, and I also want to say that's productivity as well, because what was happening is our maintenance crew and our HVAC teams were out just fixing, but not really looking at the big picture of fixing. And so a lot of their time was spent on HVAC. You know, they have a big job, we'd like them to focus on other things, so it's double play. It's, you know, not the hot cold calls all the time, and increased productivity for staff.
Well, and just another quick example, when I got here, our internet, it seemed like it was down every single day, and we invested some dollars in making sure that system now. And I mean, I can't remember the last time I had a service call that said, oh, our internet's down at Concord or whatever. I mean, in my transition year in that spring, it's like I would check my Lindbergh email and I'd be like, oh my gosh, the internet's down again. And then even my first year. And so we did. So again, those are one-time expenses to get our systems and things operating the way they were. And very fortunate that the district had those balances to be able to do that. So we want to put them back.
So it's the upfront cost to save over the long run, and so it's saving in time and money. So this is just a visual that I always like to use that shows why fund balance is important, and it's really cash flow. This is just an illustration of the last 3 years and fund balances, and you guys know when the dip is because we talk about it a lot. And our fund balances are a little bit lower than they have been in the past 3 years. Next slide. This is why reserves are needed, which again isn't really something that everybody, we all know why reserves are needed. You know, you can read this yourself, but during COVID and things like that, when we had some revenue, revenue scares, or we had some unexpected costs, you know, it's good to have the fund balances in the bank. Everything okay over there? Okay. So with local revenue being our highest revenue item, our source, it's a big deal. Next slide. This is our fund balance policy. We adopted this probably 3 years ago under Dr. Lake's tenure to just really illustrate how important fund balance is, and it also has the provision.
I hear the sirens again, Joelle.
All right,
We're going to
yep,
recess.
I know.
Bang your gavel.
Moving to recess. Returning from recess, and Joelle is presenting on the budget.
What I was saying on this part is, this is our fund balance policy, and really at the bottom is our goal when we reach this point is to replenish our fund balance in 3 years of use. Colin, next page. We're moving on to revenue estimates. Start with that. Next slide. This is a quick visual of revenue by month, and there you can see just when we get all of our revenue, which is in December, January each year. Next slide, Colin. And this slide is a good illustration of what our sources of revenue is, local. I mean, all of our money is mainly local. As you can see, state is next. I mean, it's not a small amount of money from the state, but most of our money comes from the local sources. Next. So with the local sources, we are really driven by assessed valuation and inflation. So here's some data on the Consumer Price Index, this is the month that the state gives us, when we set our levies, we have to look at growth rates from this date. So as you can see, I'm happy to see we're kind of back to normal with a 3.4. This document I have goes back to 1986, so it's just an interesting document to see inflation over the years. But we've definitely been in unprecedented times with prior years being 6.5 and 7. I've never seen that in my 28-year career, so let's get past that point. Next slide. Why do we care about CPI and the inflation rate? It's because when we set our levy, if assessed valuation outpaces inflation, then we're required per the Missouri Hancock Amendment to roll our levy back to hold taxpayers who've owned property in both years, equal and not really. It's a gouging taxpayer protection, really. It's so that the assessors we're protecting the taxpayers by large spikes in inflation. Our assessed valuation, we're limited to CPI. This is why, if you look back on our levy, we started way back 10, 15 years ago with a $4.18 levy in residential, and now we're down to $2.75, the lowest that we can go. Next slide. And this is a quick illustration that we actually used throughout our prop, and it's worked well, but it shows that if assessed valuation increases greater than CPI or 5%, what happens? Then the tax rate ceiling goes down. And then what happens if it's between 0 and 5? And then what if it declines? So it's the opposite as well. If tax rate declines, we just don't get any increases except for new construction. Next slide. So here's the new revenue, quick snippet. And we have a conservative revenue assumption, and we will make amendments to the board as revenue is realized. This is a non-reassessment year, and talking to my peers and the state St. Louis County assessor, we're estimating about 0.5% increase in values over the course of the next year. I also look at historically what we've seen. Unfortunately, we're looking at a lower collection rate. There's a lot of protest on the table. We're going to see an impact on that in our current year budget. And I think that's a lot to say about the 7 and the 6.5 and the high numbers over the last couple of years. We're seeing a protest. Taxpayers are protesting more because of increases. And then new construction, that is property that did not exist in both years. So if there's an improvement, I always like to use the Bass Pro shop as that prior, when it was more of a low-key, not doing well property, and now it's the value differential is considered new construction. So that is our assumptions for current taxes, and it doesn't mean a lot of new revenue for the district next year. Delinquent taxes is one of the items that we're dealing with in this current budget year, and it's all because of protested taxes. We collect delinquent taxes every year, and it could be from 10 years ago, 2 years ago. It's just people that don't pay their taxes on time. And eventually, if they pay them, we get it. So we get a breakdown by year, and I said it can go way back. But we also deal with St. Louis County and the protested taxes and how St. Louis County handles it. They give us in May a check for all of our protested taxes as of the end of the fiscal year, and when they put that money in our bank. And then as those taxes are settled against the county, we have to pay the county back. Well, in our current year, our protest, there's been so many protests and so many settlements against St. Louis County that our paybacks to the county have been more than our delinquent tax collections. Even though they're two different things, usually they balance out. And we do see in a normal year, about $500,000 in delinquent taxes deposited. The way it's looking this year, I'm not confident and the number of protests on the table, to really budget anything in delinquent taxes next year, hoping that at least it's 0 and not a negative, because we're going to end up with a negative number in this code this year. The next one is state sales tax. This is a Missouri state sales tax, 1 cent across the state of Missouri, that is collected by the state and then divvied to schools according to weighted average daily attendance. We're looking at that they have they're projecting larger collections next year, and that's a nice little $932,000 for Lindbergh, at least from the state number, what we're looking at. The big one, state basic formula, that's a good one this year as well. That isn't always a number. In the last couple of years, we haven't seen much in that area because it's really driven by attendance, not enrollment, but attendance. And since COVID, there's been some issues, I guess, with enrollment and attendance. Even though we're level on enrollment, attendance has been somewhat of a problem. So the state this year has increased, they're saying that they're going to increase the state adequacy target, which is the complicated formula that decides what school districts are meeting all the marks as far as grades and MAP scores and whatever, and that's the number they use for divvying up the state money to all the schools. So they're looking at like a $350, I think, increase per ADA for schools in that area. So I'm very happy to see a $1.4 million increase for our district on that. And it's not based, again, on attendance. I've projected our attendance to be flat because that's not what we've seen, that it's growing. We talked about our enrollment. Our enrollment is level, but it's not as growing as it used to be. So this is really a good number for next year. I was very happy that the legislature and the governor have given us that number. Then there's one item on here that is Dominic, as you see when we get to this board meeting, we have some new leases. He's selling off the old equipment, and he's going to contribute that one-time money towards the purchase of the new leases, which is helpful in the first year. The next years after that, we'll have to fund, but altogether, if you look at all of these revenue areas, we're looking at, and they're conservative, about a $2.73 million increase for next year. And we hopefully can bring some amendments to add to that as we get new data. It being a non-reassessment year, the St. Louis County will not give us any numbers until August. Normally in a reassessment year, they'll give us numbers in March, but I haven't found those numbers in March to be very reliable as well. So we'll find out when the rubber hits the road in August and what the AV is. Anybody have any questions on revenue? I got my timer on. All right, on to the next slide. Dr. Lake, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah,
one?
I can talk about
take a
this.
break.
So there, today it actually was voted Senate Bill 727, which is the big omnibus bill in there. It has lots of education stuff in it. There are some things in there that aren't necessarily great for public schools. It's around making sure that, there's good stuff in there. It's just, how is all that going to be paid for? And that's, some of the concern. But for us individually, there's a clause in that big bill that is really beneficial to us that if the governor signs it, August 28th of 2024, we can recode money out of Fund 10 to Fund 40, which will be 1.5 million of new ongoing money this point moving forward. And how the reason we're able to do that is when this funding formula came into existence in 2005, a lot of hold harmless districts did not take their, what they call, it's mercantile and merchant is the big fund, the big money. And they left it in Fund 10 instead of moving it to Fund 40. So what that does is it relieves less local and allows us to get more state money. And that's where that revenue is going to come from. So if the governor signs it, it is, it will be a nice influx of money for us starting this August. We don't have to wait for a long time to get it. So
And it
that is
really-
a positive from
It is a
Senate
positive.
bill. And there's other things in there that are positive, and there's some things. And, when you look at legislation, when you have one group of people, I'll just use a round number here, 100 people contacting a legislator that says don't vote for it, and you have 100 that says vote for it, that means it's probably a pretty good bill because there's good things for what different people in different lenses want for schooling. So the House voted it out today, and they're sending it straight to the governor's desk.
And I will say, there was no advantage for hold harmless schools. Hold harmless schools, it means that they were held to the same amount of money they were getting in 2005 before the formula was changed, that they weren't going to be injured by it. So they were given a fixed number. I think Lindbergh, we just tipped to hold harmless recently since Dr. Lake has been here because of our change in ADA enrollment. But they were getting a fix, like we were getting $524 per ADA when we were on the formula. So there was no reason to move money between funds because it wasn't going to impact what you got. It was a set amount. And so this isn't something that, an error on the district's part, it's just something that didn't impact them then. Yeah.
Locally, just so you know, us in Kirkwood, the total amount, in the grand scheme of things, in this large a budget, $15 million for the entire state and it's not a large number, but of that 15 million, roughly 5 million of that's going to go to Springfield, which is our largest school district in the state of Missouri. I think Kirkwood is around 1.7, and then we're 1.5. So basically, 3 school districts are really they're seeing a significant benefit. About half of that 15 million is going to 3 school districts. So it's a good thing for us.
Very good thing.
Yeah.
Next slide. Okay, now we're on to the expenditure side. Next slide. This is just a quick visual of how our expenditures flow over the course of the year. And as you can see, we're always paying bills. So this is a lot different than our revenue picture. Next slide. So I'm happy to say that our expenditure summary, it is, what we have is spending 2.73 million. And so our new estimated expenses equal our new estimated revenue. And that was really one of our primary goals is new money in is what we spend out. I mean, we want to put all the money on the table. It's not like, that's what we've done with teachers over the years, and we talk about what's our new money, and then how are we going to spend it, and make sure that that goes into staff and programs throughout the district. In addition to that, for the next year, in our attempt to add back to fund balance, we are looking at temporary reduction in expenditures over this year and next year. Like I said earlier, I think in my compass goals is if you can't increase revenue, which we just did with the other thing, so this is a double positive, you have to look at reducing expenditures. So we have a strategic spending plan that we're going to use for the next couple of years as we add back to fund balance. We've talked to our department teams, and we haven't cut their budgets, but we've asked them to stretch the dollars. And I think this is, our teams build their money from the bottom up every year, and we really have taken care of them. We haven't cut any money from anybody in years. And so we're just asking them to just really kind of streamline things a little bit more. And so by doing that, we'll generate some dollars. Again, we're not saying no to anything. We're just saying not now. Maybe push some of those projects off, travel less and things like that. And then we're going to also be, with the influx of bond proceeds, a lot of the items that were on the building's needs and wants list for capital improvements, like things that our facility team would do, we're going to be able to fund that through the prop dollars. So really, like Scott Barbagallo and the list that we usually work with him on is about $750,000 a year for things that we do on the operational side outside of bond projects. But we're going to kind of incorporate that into the building improvements when we're working at those buildings. Some of that's roofs, some of that's other things. So it's really a perfect storm on the positive side.
It is.
This year.
So basically, a lot of these one-time expenses, our buildings have been carrying over money and saving for things. We are building in the prop budget a line item in there that's going to allow that money that we would spend on those projects out of operational general money to actually stay in the budget and be unencumbered, so it actually inflates, or it builds back up that fund balance is our strategy. And I'll just tell you, we're asking like Tara, we're not cutting her budget. I'll use Tara as an example, and she makes faces at me every time. I'm asking her to try to reduce that by 20%. It's not a hard fast, you've got to do it by 20%, but if you can, that's what she means by that. And so we're just trying to do that. And Joelle and I unofficially, and if you guys, I think this is a great time in this conversation, and I want to just pose the question and we can continue to have this, but we're thinking like a $6 million at some point to get there, if that takes us 2 years, if that takes us 3 years, but really kind of build those things back up. And so we wanted to pose that question to you. We're not looking for an answer on that. We'll revisit that again. But that's just kind of what we're thinking, to be comfortable again, for us to feel like we're comfortable. So.
Yep, and I just want to make one statement on what we can move over there. We can only move
Yes.
over there capital items, and they have to be over a certain amount. I mean, it is bond money and it's all capital items, so we can't shift other expenditures over there. And we also have to stay in with our bond perimeters. But many of those items are already in there. They've been on people's list a long time.
Well, some of it's furniture, and you can use bond dollar. A lot of it is furniture that they've been saving for and things like that, that we can now say, hey, we can use our bond proceeds to do that. Because we had originally built an FF&E, which is fixtures and furniture and that kind of stuff. We always build a line item in a prop, so for those things, so.
I think this is a kind of a good time to just make the point that in talking with just people out in the community about Prop R, they were like, well, take Prop R money. Why do you need this money? You're gonna have so much money, pay the teachers more.
That's
And
why
it's
I wanted to make that statement.
important point right now to say that this is completely separate. So just to make sure that people understand that we're talking about rebuilding our budget and that it might be a little tight, and they saw all this money come in and they're just two completely separate things.
Nope, it's very separate.
But that money's allowing us to do what we're talking about, the strategy of, hey, we've carried this money, it's sitting there, but we don't count it in the fund balance necessarily because it's earmarked for something. Well, we can un-earmark it, and now it does go back to that, so.
Nope, we can't pay salaries with bond money. Nope. Next slide. So this is a detail of, a lot of work on Brian's part, and I said everybody in the district and the cabinet team and principals, a lot of getting together and talking about needs for the next year. This is the final year of our 3-year agreement with teachers, so across the board, we always reflect on the other employees, the same increase as the teachers get. So there's a 3% cost of living increase built into all wages. It really is on our thing, it's a step, everybody gets a step, and then there's a slight increase in the values of every salary schedule, so that comes up to 3%. We had done a 3-4-3, purposely putting the 3% on our non-reassessment years because that's when we have lower money. So this is how we're planning to spend. I don't know, I was thinking, do you want to say anything about this? This is all your work, the staff additions, and that they might have more questions on the elementary teacher position when we're talking about we're able to reduce 4 elementary teachers, which that also helps us pay, that reducing expenditures to pay for more projects.
But we're not taking them out of the budget.
No.
They'll just sit there, and if we don't spend that money,
Yep.
then it's budgeted,
Yep.
so.
I would only say about the elementary teacher -4, nobody lost their job over this. This is through attrition, of course, and we have several what we call watch-ups, so we use the matrix to staff. Anytime we get to where we only have 5 open seats remaining, we highlight that in red, keep careful eye on that, and so at this moment, we are 4 fewer teachers than last year, or the current year. However, enrollment will have some say about that too between now and August.
And also being 4 teachers less our elementary teachers does not mean that class sizes have gone up.
No, it is not.
No, it doesn't, and it's a back pocket. We budget that for problem-solving sections tipping over, and if we don't use it, then that again goes back to building up a fund balance. But we always budget that to problem solve, like we budget a 1.0 for Dr. Cochran to, like he needs an extra section of biology or whatever it pops, just problem solving, we build that into the budget, and what we don't use then goes back to fund balance.
So you can read this list. I just think I want to make a note on the social worker. That social worker is already in place, and what we had is this year that we're funded by some ESSER dollars, which were the COVID pandemic dollars. And so what we've decided is this year we're going to take that on as our own expense. So the position is not really new. It's just how it's funded is new, and that's going to be a new expense for our budget. The other part here about community ed restructure, and then benefits added to Flyers, 7 Flyers Club staff. This was an early discussion at the beginning of last school year when we have the large waiting list, our very popular school-age childcare program. And, we have very transient staff in those programs. And so normally we can't get to our waiting list because we just don't have the staff. So some people will stick with us longer if we can provide benefits, and looking at hopefully 7 individuals that, will be part of our team longer, we can meet those waiting list requirements at the beginning of the year. Next slide. These are the other reoccurring that aren't related to salaries and wages. Jamie's not here, but she did a lot of work around this new Crestwood SRO. I mean, she spent hours on it, and so we're really excited about that piece and what it's going to do for our buildings and that person patrolling the area. So that's happening. That's around about a $75,000 ticket.
I want to make sure that people know that's not just for Crestwood Elementary. It's the city of Crestwood for the people out there watching. We're partnering with the city of Crestwood. They're going to provide and partner with us an officer there instead of St. Louis County.
It's not the school, it's the city.
Yeah,
the city
and
of
actually that
Crestwood.
person will serve Truman and then the 3 elementaries that feed Truman Middle School.
Yeah, they have a good, big job, but it'll be helpful because we didn't have them before. So you'll see at the board meeting tonight, technology lease renewals, we're going back to starting a new lease. And of course, prices aren't the same as they were 5 years ago, but Dominic has done a good job bidding that out. And so we have some increases in that area. Like I said, he's going to give us back the money that he sells the old devices with, and so we're going to defer some of those costs for the first year. Transportation, we did approve that contract. Even in our old contract, like I said, there was an annual increase, but the first year on this one, it's a little bit higher. Again, brand new contract, things are different than they were 5 years ago, and we've put in some places. After this year, it will be a standard 4% every year. Insurance, this is an area not on benefit side, but district liability and workman's comp, unemployment, that's up a little bit. Actually, with music and that program, we don't really get dinged for making claims because we're in a consortium, but those prices do go up over time. Professional development, Apple unwinding, that's Tara, but we're hiring someone internally to do the Apple training because we can get more bang for our buck with an employee than what we're going to pay Apple for a lot less time. And I know they've been interviewing for that position this week. Team uniforms, we have an item when we add an extra duty, extra pay, or some new programming. We also have to put towards that our contribution towards uniforms. We don't fund the 100% of the project, but we try to give everybody something equitable, and then if they want something fancier, then they'll contribute dollars. And band uniforms, this was a good one though, because Tara came to me a couple months ago and said, they want to buy all new uniforms, and that's a $150,000 ticket, on that cycle. And then they met and talked more, and they've decided, I think this happened the last time, that they really want to do something a little simpler, this rotation schedule, and I think we're down to $30,000. So thank you, band. We were willing to put the $150,000 up, but we were really happy with the $30,000 ticket. Any questions on expenditures?
I guess, does that apply, or what other areas does that type of rotation apply to? I thought perhaps like with uniforms that it might come out of the music department or the band department's expense or budget. Are there other areas throughout the district?
It's like I said, I'd have to look at the actual rotation schedules that we have built. I don't have them memorized. It's really, the high school puts them together, but like I said, what we try to do is, they're serving our students, so we contribute something to each group, just as, a district paid, and then the group will contribute other through fundraising, our parent contribution, if they want something bigger. But we try to do that equitably across all of our booster groups, our co-curricular programs. And it's good to have a rotation schedule, because just like last year with the textbook rotation schedule, there are years that are more expensive. And so, coming out of this year, we did have a one-time expenditure for a new curriculum adoption that was $1.5 million, and that also plays into, coming from fund balance. But we do look at all of our programs and try to contribute, even though we can't contribute everything.
So question to the group. So Joelle has a few more slides, and it's about debt summary, and
Yeah, it's
because
pretty
of our
quick. It's pretty quick.
delays,
Yep.
we're getting close to our exec session time. We want to make sure we have enough
4
time in
minutes.
exec session. Do we want to have her next month just do a little short
I
presentation?
can do
on-
these 3 slides in 4 minutes. That's what I got on my calendar, 4:33.
You want to do these during your cabinet?
Oh, I like that.
Update?
Yep.
At the board meeting?
Yeah, these are
Okay.
really simple ones.
That's good. Yep.
The revenue expenditure was the big
We'll
part.
do that as a cabinet update.
Okay. All right. I'm always here for questions if you have them.
So we're at 5.0 adjournment of our workshop. Do I have a motion to adjourn board workshop 1595?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting is adjourned at 6:29.